doing? My name is Lars Christensen, and thank you so much for joining today's live stream number 107. It is Monday. Happy Monday, everyone. It is December 18th, 3 p.m. Eastern. Let's play with Fusion, man. Let's do it. Today's topic is understand the Surface Patch Workspace. So, got a few emails from people who kind of like asked the question, what is this patch workspace? These binoculars in there. And you know, if you're regular at the live stream, then first of all, thank you. We have been in this space on and off when we are doing different things, and that's kind of maybe what this workspace is really used for mostly today, as a little bit like a band-aid, or to kind of like use it in that regard. But you know, I thought it was good to dedicate just one live stream to kind of like talk a little bit about the basics of what we call the patch or surface modeling inside of Fusion 360, and kind of like how it fits together. So let's do that. So all of you guys, I hope, are pretty familiar with the standard modeling environment, right? So if I go in here and follow along here, I'm going to create a new sketch. Click sketch. I'm in the model environment, and I'm selecting a plane to sketch on. I'm going to hit my S key just to get a center rectangle, and I'm just going to sketch that up to some kind of a dimensions, 100 by 100, whatever. Now it's fully defined. We're all happy. Let's hit Q for press pull. It's going to go in there, and we click in the area that we want to extrude into a solid, right? And we can now give it some kind of a length. Hit OK, and what we got now is we talked about this last Monday. We got a body, a solid body, right? A block like this. This is what we all are kind of like familiar with as a standard modeling. Well, before, in the olden days, back, I don't know, back in the 80s or something like that, most of the stuff that us normal people used were 2D, right? So straight line drawings. It's probably hard to see, but I have that big picture right there behind me. That's actually a 2D drawing made back in 1927. It's kind of cool. A customer one time gave me. But everything was 2D, AutoCAD, 2D. But then inside the computers, we started creating surfaces. That's what I like to call it, swoopy things. And that was actually the intro into 3D modeling like you just saw. Because what happens in the background to create this, what we just did, we created a 2D sketch, a rectangle. We extruded it up like this. Well, all this actually in the past originated with straight surfaces. So what the software actually is doing in the background is, let me start a new file. Let me do the same rectangle. Create a sketch, new rectangle. So this is no different. Create a rectangle, 100 by 100, just like this. Now, when we now in the model environment hit Q, what the software does in the background is it actually goes into surfacing kind of way, and it will go in and it will do an extrude. It's still an extrude. You will see in the patch surface, all these commands are kind of the same ones we have seen in the modeling environment, but it will do an extrude just like we saw, and we made it 50 millimeters up, and it will do the same thing here. However, what you will see when I hit OK is that it didn't get enclosed. It is actually just kind of like 4 walls going straight up. And if we look over in the tree, you will see that it's what we call a surface body. So the software does, when we are doing our normal modeling, it does this, it extrudes it up, but then when it has extruded up to the 50, the software looks and says, can I now kind of like make this watertight? And when I mean watertight, think of like a water bottle. Can we make it completely watertight? So what the software does in the background is to create what we here call a patch. So it literally just closes the top and it closes the bottom. So now we kind of like have this box, but it's completely hollow, right? It doesn't know anything in there. If we did like a section view through here, a section analysis, these walls here have no thickness. They're like paper thin, no thickness at all. So then the software says, all right, now where it's watertight, now I'm going to make it into a solid, into a fully solid body. And it uses the stitch command here. So if I click on that and I window select that whole box, now if it is a watertight solid, it will close it completely up and turn it into a body. So what we did first, standard beginning, a sketch and an extrusion created a solid body. We just did the exact same thing in here. These two models are completely identical right now. Okay, they had the same dimensions, but you will see that in the Surface or the Patch Workspace, look how many steps we created in here to do what we normally would just do right in the beginning. So the software, when we're creating a standard extrusion, it actually kind of like goes through this work environment to be able to create that. So somebody might ask a good question, and that is, well, okay, so, you know, this is stupid then, right? Like we have we have it over here. Why do we still need that patch workspace? Well, we can use it for different things. Now, in Fusion, I use patch less than I have done in any other CAD system, such as SolidWorks or Inventor. And the reason that I'm using it less than I have in the past is, let me open a new file, because of this, right? We got that whole Sculpt workspace inside of Fusion where we can pull and drag and create these different shapes. However, when we're done with things inside of the Sculpt environment, if we don't turn it completely, closes it and make it watertight, that will also become a surface body. So let me show you that. Like if I go in here, so now we're in this, and I hope this is not confusing. But that's always my fear, right? If I go in here, create a cylinder in the in the Sculpt workspace, like this here, hit OK. This is what we call a sculpting environment right now. You will see that we got the purple kind of like shape here. And of course, the wonderful thing about this environment is we can right click, hit edit form, and we can literally do so many cool things. We have covered this so many times in the past that I don't know if I need to do too much of that right now. But we really get a lot of these great tools in here where we can create these different shapes. Now, if I in here, you do have options to close off this and make it into a watertight model. But if you don't do that and you exit the form workspace, you will see that that also becomes a surface body. So the surface body is still used in the Sculpt environment. It still creates this surface or patch. So I could now close this one off by going into patch, create the same I did before. Like I can close the lid off here on the two sides, like this here. And now I can do what I did before. I can stitch it together to make sure that it's completely watertight. If it's completely watertight, then it will become a solid model. Okay, so this here was a sculpted environment that became a full body. You always are aiming for this. You're aiming for it to be a solid body in here. Okay, so the patch surface comes in handy many times when you are coming from the sculpting environment and going back into the modeling environment. A good example was we did a coffee mug at one point where we modeled up the kind of like the container part in a solid model, but then we did the handle in the sculpt environment, and then we attached them in the end by using the patch environment. So go back through the live streams. I can't remember what number it was. I should have looked that up. But maybe I put it in the description after for the recording, so you can see there how you can use that patch environment. Now, another thing that is worth bringing up about the patch environment, so you saw here how I created kind of like the same box with all these different steps. One of the nice things about the patch environment is that it's almost like we are working with separate sheets or blankets that kind of like creates the walls. And what I mean by that is that if you ever have any shapes that some kind of a shape that is kind of hard to visualize how you will model it up in the standard model environment, if you break it down into kind of like side by side, like each surface, how they kind of like come together, then the patch environment can be a little bit easier to do that. Let me give you an example on that. If I, for example, go in right now and let's go in and create a cylinder. And let's go ahead here and just create a circle. Doesn't really matter how big diameter we make it here. And let's extrude that up like this. What do we get now? Now we get a solid. Well, wait a minute. I was in the patch environment, right? So our normal commands like Q for press pull still will create a body. Okay, you will have to go in and specify the surface commands in here. So just make sure that you keep track of that. Let me just delete that extrusion and let me just go ahead here and do a extrude. So now we're just getting a thin wall that have absolutely, we can look right through it, right? There's no bottom. It's just a surface body. Now, what I can do is let me go ahead and open another sketch on this surface here. And let's create a spline that maybe goes something like that. And let's create something that goes the opposite way, maybe like this here. Okay, so now I just created two splines, kind of like organic shapes. Now, like I said, this is really like working with blankets. If I go in here now and I say I want to extrude these two splines, and let me just go ahead and make them symmetrical so they go on both sides. Now think of this like blankets. This is really like big blankets. So now I had an open cylinder, but I just closed it off with two kind of blankets like this. Now what I could do was that I could trim, and many times when you're using pads, you're overextending everything. So you're going way too big with everything, and then you can go into the trim command, and it looks at what are you going to trim, what is going to be your trim tool. So now I can go in and say I'm going to trim, this is going to be my trim tool. I'm going to get rid of the top, hit OK. So now that goes away. I can right click, I can say repeat trim. I can say now this is going to be my trim tool. And this is what I want to go get away. Now it's everything on the outside, everything that turns red are going to go away. So now we just left with that patch right there Do the same thing on the bottom down here. Let's flip it over. Right click, repeat trim. This is going to be my trim tool. This is what I want to get rid of. Hit OK. Redo it again. Right click, repeat trim. This is going to be my trim tool. This is what I want to get rid of. And hit OK like that again. I'm going to turn that sketch off. Now we kind of like, it's still just a shell. It's 3 different surfaces. It is the outside. And it's kind of like these 2 weird lids I just made. Well, if I go in and use that stitch again, highlight the whole thing, hit OK, I now have created a kind of obscure shape that if you were going to make this in the model environment, could be a little bit harder to visualize how you would have done that. Let's take it a little bit further. Let me. One of the things that you can get used to when you're working this space, just like when we do in the sculpting environment, is actually working a little bit with symmetry. So I think this might be a little bit easier. Let's go in here in the drop down. You will see a tool we've used before, what is called split body. Now I'm going to go in and say I'm going to split the body, this body, and I'm going to split it with the origins plane that is cutting right through the center here. So I'm just going to select that as my splitting tool. Okay, so now I just cut right through it. Actually, you know what? Let's get rid of the stitching. So now it's just the surface. So let's go in here, edit, and let's go in and say we're going to split these surfaces. And we're still splitting with a tool. So now what I have, I just split that whole shell into all these different segments. Here's another interesting thing. If I hold down Shift, select these 3, and I right click and I hit delete. Look what it says here. This feature is referenced by other features in the timeline. Because the way we created all this, if I say delete right now, it will delete the whole thing because they are referenced. If I instead select the 3 and right click and say remove, then I'm just removing these 3 bodies. If I say delete, then it looks at the whole thing and it wants to delete the whole thing because it doesn't seem, these faces are not separate in that regard from the other one. So that's just a question I'll get some often. Why use the remove instead of delete? Okay, so now you will see that we kind of like, we still got the wacky shape. Now we kind of like got that as a shell of these 3 different ones here. Now let's have some fun with this. Let's go in and try to offset this surface, outside surface here. And again, I'm just trying to show you how Patch Workspace can do things that could be fairly difficult to imagine how to do in the model workspace. Not that you not necessarily could do it. Let me offset this one. See, I can offset that surface. Let's offset it inward a little bit. Just 5 millimeters is fine. Hit OK. So now that surface there, this surface, the blue surface, is kind of like an offset of the outside surface. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's create a line on the origin. Let's start a sketch here. Create a new sketch from here to here. And let's go ahead and create a line from here down to about right there. So now there's just a sketch line sitting right there. Now we have all the same tools as you would have inside of your kind of standard modeling tools. So if we go in here, we do have the suite that we've covered before. So if I say a single path and my profile is this line here, my path is that upper edge, and it's have chain selection. I'm just going to select that outside. Now we're going to create another surface. That surface, let me just hide this surface here, top surface. So now we kind of like created a little umbrella that sticks out there. That surface out there. Now, as you can see, I'm creating a lot of surfaces, and I understand if you're thinking right now, wow, this is becoming a little bit complex. But let me just kind of like show you where I'm kind of headed with this. Now, with this offset surface here, I might just say, you know what, that offset surface there, you know, I don't want that anymore. Remove that. So now I kind of like end up with a inner surface right here, right? So now I could start trimming these different surfaces. So let's go in here back to the trim tool, and I'm gonna take that upper lid we had before, and I'm gonna remove that top edge of this top up here. Now it might go a little bit under, we will find out. It's probably going on. We might have to actually use the extend tool. There's also an extend tool. We can extend a surface up like that. Go in here, trim. So we're gonna select this top and get rid of this inside. If I can select it, there we go. So now we kind of like trim that, the inside edge we offset it in. And you end up with a lot of this when you're kind of like working in this environment. You will see that I'm gonna have to trim, use this as a trim tool. See if I can select this inside here, trim that to that. I'm gonna right click again. I'm gonna use that curve here to trim that inside right there. Sometimes it's a little hard to select. Oh, now I'm struggling. That's why we like these live streams, right? Okay, let's see if it helps if I extend that surface before I cut the other one. Trim. This is going to be my trim tool. This is the portion I want to get rid of. Okay, there's something that isn't so one of oh, there we go. So one of the things that I'm sometimes playing with is exactly this, figuring out how to extend these surfaces. Get rid of that there. See, I can't go back because then I would probably... I wonder if this is my recording software that is doing this. I'm not a quitter. All right, I'm gonna trim the bottom edge instead. That will be selected. Right click, repeat trim. Select the bottom edge with this edge here. There we go. And then that is trimmed. Oh, and that trimmed that up too. Okay, it must have been selected. All right, so look at this now. Sorry about that. Oh, we are missing a little bit down at the bottom. Repeat trim. This is my trim tool. There we go. So what I have now is I kind of like offset that outside surface in here. Now, just like when we're working normally inside of the model environment, we have a lot of the same tools, right? Like you saw these in here. We also have the mirror command. So now we can select this whole thing and we can mirror it over this plane. Okay. And then again, it's all these surface bodies here. And now we can go in and we can select them all. And if they're watertight, we can trim them all into one body, one solid body. So the patch tool, though it many times looks like a lot of different steps to get to a point where you can get something like this, it has the capabilities that you can build things. I like to think about like sheets. Like if you had like a sheet you put on your bed and how you can kind of like string it along. You don't have to worry about intersections. Then you just trim everything, and then in the end, you kind of stitch together. However, I will say though that with the sculpting environment inside of Fusion, the pads or the surfacing environment it's really not an environment that I go into that much. It used to be like using SolidWorks or Inventor. It used to be that anytime you built something that was very called super surfaces, like your mouse. If you're looking, I can't get my mouse in the picture. If you're looking at the shape of your mouse that you're holding in your hand, these organic shapes, everything used to be done with surfaces because it was very hard to do with straight solids. Again, with the sculpting environment, that helped us really. We don't have to build all those different walls up. All right, man. I hope that was somewhat useful. Kind of like trying to break it down. So, like I said at the beginning, that just from a software standpoint, the software is really just to make a block. It's really kind of following a surfacing, building momentum to get in there. For us, in our daily modeling environment, I really think we're using the patch more to kind of like I said, close off sculpted environments. Also, another thing that it can be really handy for, and I don't have an example here, would be imported geometry. So if you imported something like a step on IGES file that was supposed to be a solid, if it comes in when you bring it in as a bunch of surfaces, that normally means that somewhere in the translation between the original software into Inventor or Fusion, that there was some hiccup and now the model is not watertight. If it's not watertight, it's going to all become surfaces. And here you can use these patch tools to kind of like close it up, make it watertight again, stitch it together, and then you can turn it into a solid. The solid is what we normally always, that's where we want to go, is to turn it into to that body. I hope that was useful. I hope it was not too much over the place. I just realized that I hadn't really done one on the Patch Workspace, and I got a couple of emails about what the heck that will be used for. So I hope that somewhat enlightens it. All right, guys, I'm going to end today's live stream. I hope you had a great weekend. Hope you got going with your Monday. Let's do another week of live streams before it's Christmas. Take care, guys. I'm going to end the broadcast like I normally do and jump into the live stream and say hi to everybody in the chat. Take care, guys.